So thanks for coming. I think I know everybody here tonight. There are a few people watching online. If you don't know who I am, my name's Carl Lukings, and this is our Resource Stage seminars. And so tonight we are talking about streaming. And I'm going to start this off this was really weird. We decided that we were going to do this seminar and start talking about this tonight. We decided this about 3 months ago. 2 months ago, I guess. Andrew and I were talking. Andrew said, I got to get this out. I need to send this out. We need to talk about what it is that we're going to talk about in March. I said, well, you know what? We haven't talked about streaming in a while. We get a lot of phone calls about streaming. We should talk about streaming. Okay. So he went ahead and sent that out. And then we ended up with these things like, with this big virus thing going around, right? And we have now started to realize that there's more and more of our clients who are trying to figure out how do they do streaming. In fact, we got our first email from a church client today saying, we've been asked by the board of elders in our church to figure out if we have to close the church, what does it cost to stream services? And that's an interesting reality that we're needing to start looking at. We will not be putting out any ads that say, if you want to close your church, then you should stream, or anything silly like that. That's not what we're going to do at all. But if people contact us and ask us, how do we stream specifically because of the coronavirus, then we will certainly try to help out where we can. But it is a bit of a interesting timing that's kind of come together here. So we have been streaming our seminars like this one for a few years now. We started off saying, we should start looking at streaming because some of our clients are starting to look at it. And we started streaming with just essentially a webcam. And it was really just an experiment. We wanted to see what would happen. And we started playing around with, I think at the time it was WebEx. And we were using a web camera interface going to WebEx, and it was terrible. It was really bad. It was streaming at standard definition. It was choppy. We didn't understand a bunch of things about how to set the bit rate and that kind of stuff, and the audio wasn't good. And as a company that started off as doing audio, it was pretty embarrassing. But we knew that we needed to learn. And we knew that we needed to try this because we knew that we would have more and more clients asking about it, and we do. We have lots of clients asking about streaming, dealing with 2 or 3 different clients today who are talking about streaming. None of them are here tonight, but trying to figure out how do they get into streaming. Tonight, I'm going to try to go over a bit of an overview of different things that you need to think about while you're streaming. I have a sneaky suspicion I'm probably going to answer some questions tonight for you, but I'm also probably going to raise some questions. And there's probably some things that you're going to need to just stand back and go, how am I going to deal with that in my situation? And then, you can contact us and we can try to help you out. We can also give you some resources, point you in the direction of a couple of different manufacturers who've done a really good job of providing resources. The streaming that we're doing here tonight, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the streaming that we're doing here tonight is 2 cameras, a couple of computers, video switcher, and a streaming device. Actually, Ken, are we recording tonight? Is that recording is running on the data video product? Okay, great. So then we're also splitting the output and we're going to a recording device that's locally. Oh, it's recording to the computer, not to the streaming device or to the other device. Okay. So anyway, we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight as well. Okay. As always, if you've got a question, just feel free to ask. Okay. So first thing about streaming or recording or any of this kind of stuff is why. What's the point? Why do you want to do this? And, as I already said, one of the reasons that we're being contacted right now is because some people are saying we can't, we need to be prepared if we have to shut the doors of our church for a couple of weeks or something of the sort. But I think that this whole question of why are you doing this can help to put stuff into perspective. It's going to help to answer some of the questions that you need to be able to figure out. If you start out with, why are we trying to do this? And if you said, all you guys are from churches, so if you said, well, we believe that the ministry that we're doing in our church, we want to broadcast that to the world. Okay, that's one answer. If you say we want to broadcast what we're doing in our church to the old folks' home right across the street, then that's another thing. If you're wanting to do somewhere between, that's fine. If you want to do, we've got a good number of people in our congregation who are truck drivers or who are snowbirds or they are, whatever. We've heard all kinds of different reasons why it is that people figure that it's a good idea to stream. Once you start to figure out that, why it is that you're streaming, then it can start to help you figure out, okay, how do I need to do this? What's the expectation of those people? Are we trying to stream it because, we used to produce a video that would go to Rogers Cable or to Shaw Cable or something like that. They don't want our video anymore because of various different reasons, so we're going to do this ourselves, but we want it to have top-notch quality. That's one thing. If it's, we want to stream because we want to be able to stream weddings for some of the families in our church who have families overseas and they want to be able to watch the wedding. Well, do they need a full-blown streaming service, or do they just need, we want to see one camera, just kind of a nice shot? There's all kinds of different reasons for this. I remember hearing stories from different people who are from churches, and they're in, they're watching the stream at home, and they're saying, it's great when I can watch the stream from home and they take nice wide shots of the audience, and because then I see some of the people I haven't seen in months because I'm not able to go to the church, and so they feel like they're part of the congregation because they're able to say, hey, look at, there's Susan, and I haven't seen her in months, and it's great to be able to see her. So there's different reasons, right? All kinds of different reasons. And if you start to put together this list of what's important about this stream, then it'll help you make some determination as to how you want to put these things together. Okay? So, goals and vision. You need to plan it out, figure out how we're going to do this, if you just start throwing stuff together on Tuesday for Sunday streaming. I'm not talking about any specific church this week in London, Ontario that called us today, but whatever. If that's what, planning is a good idea. Know your audience. Who's actually going to be watching this? Who's actually sitting in the auditorium, in the sanctuary, in your church? Because that can have an impact. There are some times where there are situations where people are like, what are you doing taking video of us? We don't want that. And then you have to have we've had some church, they say, we never, ever, ever, ever want the camera to be able to hit the audience. Other churches say, everywhere. Build the technology around the goal, not the goal around the tech. And this is a mistake that's really easy for us to make as people who are technology-based. A lot of the people who come to our seminars, a lot of the people that we talk to all the time, they're technical people. And so they look at it and go, well, you know what, I've got this at home, I've got this camera at home, I got that old SD camera, it's a VHS thing, and it's got that yellow composite video coming out of it. That sounds great. Why don't we just do that, right? Don't build your streaming system around that technology. Figure out what the goal is first and then go from there, okay? So, jumping right into HD versus SD. Does it matter? And, this is a big question because we need to start talking immediately about, are we just going to broadcast something that gives a bit of a snapshot from a distance of this is what it looks like, or are we needing to do something that is high definition that's going to look like the Monday night football game? I can tell you that you probably don't have the budget for the Monday night football game level. It's probably not going to happen. But what do you need? What are you going to try to hit? What's the expectation? I can tell you that we've asked some questions at different times from some of the streaming companies that we work with, some of the streaming services. And we've said questions like, what is the standard upload that most people are using? How are they streaming to the web? And they said, well, most people are streaming at 1080p. That's where most people are sending it up. Okay, but what is the download? Well, this maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, the average download was 720p. It seems like, we are getting faster. More and more people are having fiber at their home or different speeds of internet, and you can get 1080p down, but still a lot of people are just as happy for the kind of events that we're talking about streaming to be able to stream at 720p. So if you're uploading at 720p, at 1080p, but everybody's downloading at 720, do I need to convince the leadership in our church to get a better internet speed if the truth is that 720 would be totally fine and the people who are watching it don't care? Yes, sir.
Would that be more of something that you set in your encoder, or would that be making a different encoder that you got to buy, or is that something you can start at 720 and then just change your programming to 1080 in a couple of years' time?
Yeah. So
Totally different equipment.
yeah, so if you're asking, do I need to buy completely different equipment for 720p standard definition and 1080p and 4K and all that kind of thing? Certainly, if you're going from standard definition to high definition, that's often a technology change. But if you're looking to go from 720p to 1080p, often that is within the same technology. So that's a matter of changing what your bit rate is that you're encoding at. Going from 1080 to 4K is usually another hardware jump. Again, whether or not streaming to 4K is really a wise decision right now or not, that's a big question. In 5-7 years from now, it'll probably be, I don't know why you're streaming at 1080p. That's ridiculous. But we're not there yet. And then, what can you afford? Okay, this is an interesting piece, because a lot of times people are saying, well, that coming back to why am I streaming? Are you streaming and expecting that there's going to be some sort of financial windfall from that? Probably not in the average church, right? It's probably not going to be the case. It's probably more about engagement of the person to what you're doing rather than engagement with the person's finances, for the most part. So you can't pass the plate. You can have a donation button off to the side, but you can't pass the plate. That's right. So what do I need? Well, you need a way to capture the content that you have. Okay? Number one, capture that content. Number two, you need to encode that video somehow into a format that you can send up to the web. Okay? Now, that can be a couple of different things, but you need to be able to do that. You've got to be able to get that somehow to there. And then you need a video streaming service. Sometimes people are a little bit confused by this. Sometimes people say, well, but I can just take that, and can't I just have that go directly to my internet service provider, and then I can have something on my website to go from there? That becomes, first of all, yes, you can do it, but no, most people don't do it that way. Because usually the bandwidth with your internet service provider for your website is not designed for that, and it becomes a big mess. And unless you're really into that sort of thing, it's probably not really practical. So most people, they're streaming to a streaming service. And we're going to talk about a couple of those later on, but usually it's a separate service. Okay? So let's start with cameras, because cameras are the easiest initial input device. Okay? Now, I should say that cameras can actually be the input device, as well as, in some cases, you can go directly from the camera to your streaming service. So the PTZ cameras that we have at the back here, we've got 2 of them here tonight. Those 2 cameras actually have the ability, we can put in the credentials into the camera and we can stream directly to a service provider from there. That would be a unique piece. That may or may not be a good idea. You can take an audio input directly into the camera, and if there was, for some reason, a reason that you wanted to be able to do that, you can. But one of the other things that's kind of handy about that is that you could use one of those cameras and you can stream within your building right from that same camera. So you could stream to a nursery, a green room, a hallway, or something like that directly from the camera to some sort of box that would decode that signal. Okay? Within cameras, we always get this conversation about 4K and about whether you want 1080p or SD or what have you. And just so we're on the same page, when I say SD, I mean 480i typically. Okay? And usually we're much, much further beyond that. Again, I've already kind of said it, but at this point in time, most of our clients don't need to be streaming in 4K, but certainly the ability is there if you want to do it. We can sell you the products to do it. Okay. One of the big questions that comes up about cameras is whether or not you should go to a static camera or a manual camera, or if you should be going to a PTZ camera. PTZ standing for pan, tilt, and zoom. Okay. Manual cameras are great if you've got manual people. If you don't have manual people, then going to a PTZ camera is fantastic. It seems really obvious, but the cost of going to a PTZ camera has come down in price significantly. I'm thinking, and I could be wrong about this, Don, these cameras are somewhere in the area of, is it like $3,000, something of that sort?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Give or take. Might be $3,200, something like that.
No, but less.
Pardon me?
About 25.
Yeah, it depends on which ones they are, because there's a variety of different reasons why a camera might be more or less. So for instance, the cameras that we're referring to here tonight, they have HDMI output, SDI output. You can send video directly off of the Ethernet connection. They're powered over PoE, so we don't have a separate power supply going to them. There's one network cable going to them and one SDI cable for that camera and one HDMI cable for this camera. They are both controlled and powered, as I said, using the Ethernet jack, so they both go back to a network switch that's got PoE, and then Ken is able to control those cameras with the camera controller. We can also control those cameras with an iPad, with a phone, with software, a whole bunch of different things we can do. Okay? Those cameras, these ones in particular, have 30 times zoom. Does that sound right to you, Don? I believe they've got 30 times zoom lenses, which all of those different things have an impact. You may say that, a 30 times zoom seems like a lot. Well, the difference between a 20 times zoom and a 30 times zoom is not that much difference in cost. So we use 30 times in our rentals and for Resource Stage, because as those of you who've been here before, sometimes we're zooming in on a console face or something like that. We need to be able to show detail, and they're great for that kind of thing. Okay. You can certainly buy PTZ cameras for less money now, but it depends. If they're SD cameras, they go a lot cheaper. You can also spend a lot more on these cameras too. You can easily spend $10,000 and $20,000 on a PTZ camera, depending on what you need it to be able to do. Okay. We tend to recommend PTZs if you can afford it, because of the fact that for a lot of people, PTZs are great if you just don't have a lot of people to be able to help you out. Okay. Now, with that being said, Ken, we were talking about something here earlier on where we're going to try to zoom in on this screen for the stream. Are you able to do that? There we go. And then with the other camera, can you just kind of move through a couple of different presets? So one of the things that you'll notice here is that as Ken is pulling up different presets with that camera, there we go. It's moving really quick. And so the settings that he's got there right now, it is moving around, and the pan and the tilt is moving at one speed, and then the zoom is moving at a different speed. And there's settings, and that's actually one of the differences between different types of cameras. And you need to decide for yourself whether or not those settings are important to you or not. So for instance, we typically, when we're doing streaming of anything, or if we're recording and we're doing this kind of stuff, we typically don't bounce back and forth between, or sorry, we typically don't have that camera zooming back and forth live. We try not to move the camera live so much. So often what we'll do is we'll set up a situation where one camera is doing, has got a static shot, and the other camera is moving while we're on the static shot and back and forth. So that's one of the big reasons why we're often recommending using multiple cameras, so that you can have one or two cameras that can move, and then one or two cameras that can be static shots that you can bounce back to, so that you're not making somebody seasick. Does that make sense? Okay. For resource stage, we can get a lot of shots out of two cameras, and we can make it look pretty reasonable, bouncing back and forth without making people seasick.
Carl,
Yeah.
I know this goes back a few years, and it definitely wasn't in the $3,200 range.
Yeah.
We had I thought we had a camera we had at the college, and the instructor could have like a wireless transmitter they carried with them.
Yeah.
The camera followed them.
Yeah.
Do you have that available?
Yeah, so you're talking about the cameras so there's different types of things. So cameras that can follow people and follow them around, whether that's a belt pack on them, or in some cases, there are situations where there's pads in the floor. So not in the floor, but on top of the carpet or whatever, where you can stand on a position and then the camera zooms into that. And then as soon as the professor or the talker or the pastor or whoever steps off of that, then it automatically zooms out to a wider shot, and it can do different things. Yes, we can certainly do that. That's usually, again, not in that $3,000, $3,500 sort of range, but that actually has more to do with the camera control than it does with the camera itself. So Vaudio is a company that has been doing that kind of thing for a long time and is very big within the education market. But we can use that controller technology with other cameras as well. So the short answer is yes, we can still do that kind of thing, and it's definitely a big deal. There's also there's also technology out there where we're using cameras. I can pick up my cell phone and I can move my cell phone camera around, and all of a sudden it puts funny ears and a hat on each of your faces while I'm pointing it at you, right? It's recognizing faces, right? That sort of technology is pretty standard. Our kids use that all the time. Well, that same sort of technology is being used for these kinds of cameras as well. So there are situations where, again, lecture halls, that sort of thing, where a camera will focus in on somebody's face. And you can say, well, I want it to be, this sort of framing for the face when the face ends up here, right? And so then the camera will follow the person based on where the face shows up. So then as soon as I am moving, it's following me, but as soon as I step out of the area that it's been set up to watch for, then the camera would automatically go to a wide screen. And it'll sit there in the computer that's running that camera will say, where's the face, where's the face, where's the face, where's the face? Oh, there's the face, and then pick up again. Okay? That kind of stuff is definitely available. A lot of that is replacing people, right? So it comes back to how many people do you have, how much money do you have, right? Those are always the two handoffs. Okay?
What's the price range if we're looking at something who's going to be able to track the pastor?
$6 million.
Okay, it's a little high.
Yeah. You know what? I'm not sure. We'd have to look at it because there's a couple different things. And actually, probably Don is the guy to talk to about that because he's got the most experience with Vaudio products and that sort of thing. Does that sound right, Mr. Clausen? Yep. He says. Okay. Cool. All right. So moving along, zoom range. We should talk about zoom range really quickly. And I'm going to just show you here. This is QSC's website. QSC is a manufacturer that we use for lots of different things. And QSys, one of their control systems. Oh, let me just drag this over here so you actually can see what I'm talking about. One of their control systems. One of the things that they have is cameras. And this is a kind of a cool tool. Other manufacturers have this. PTZ Optics has something like this as well. And it gives us the ability to say, Okay, well, we are about 37 feet or meters. It works either way. So if I'm using the 12 by 72 camera, then this is what kind of shot I'm going to get. If I'm using the 20 by 60 camera, then, or a 20 times zoom, then this is the shot I'm going to get. So it's pretty handy. So if you're trying to figure out where my camera is going to be, what kind of lensing do I need? Like I said, we've got 30 time zoom here. But if you were to use a 20 time zoom and you were 37 feet away, right here tonight, we are about, give or take, we're about 32 feet away from me to the camera, something like that. So in theory, we could go up to 37.7 wide or down to 2 feet wide if we were using the 20 times zoom. Okay? It's a handy tool if you're trying to figure out what kind of camera do I need. All right? And so if you call us up and say, which PTZ camera? We're going to say, well, where are you going to mount your cameras? And then we're going to talk to you about what does that look like. All right? Cool. So for instance, you guys, Temple and Sarnia, if you were to put a camera up in your back area or in the AV area, you're going to use probably a different camera than what Jim would use at Crossroads, because very different distance from the back wall. All right. Drag this back over here and moving right along. Oh, there we go again. Okay, so just really briefly, check your camera settings. This is something that we are, I think, getting better at, but we have lots to learn still. And that is just making sure that you've got your camera settings set properly. And this is a pretty big deal for streaming, partly because if you're trying to make this look good, if people want to be able to watch it, then if things are really wonky between cameras, then it's going to make things really kind of funky. And it drives people nuts. It just does. People get tired when their eyes are constantly shifting between different colors, different color temperatures. So one of the things that we have been trying to get better and better at is trying to make sure that the different cameras that we're using, the different camera shots look pretty similar. So we're trying to make sure that, you know, things like the color on the wall is similar, the color on my face is similar, the color on my shirt is similar, all that kind of stuff between the two cameras. So that's making sure the settings and the cameras are the same, but also doing things like your white balance and all that kind of stuff. Okay? All right. Yes.
PTZ cameras, do they have memory presets for like an evening service and a morning service when you get different sunlight and stuff?
So these PTZ cameras do not have different presets for different times of the day and that kind of thing, at least not that I can think of off the top of my head. These cameras do not. Lots of video switchers do. So if you came up with a specific look that you wanted to use for the cameras, and then if you needed to make some tweaks within the video switcher, then that you could recall those presets, but that would not be recalling presets on the cameras themselves. I'm just trying to think if the Vadio cameras have that ability with the, you know what I'm talking about, Don? With the external controller.
Possibly, I can't remember.
Yeah, so maybe in the Vadio ones, but in these PTZ Optics ones do not, I don't believe. Okay, it's a good question. All right, so lighting. More is better until it isn't. I remember years and years ago using analog video cameras, and you always had to have as much light on stage as possible. And as the guy who was often doing lighting, it drove me nuts because I was like, what on earth? I made this look really nice. And now the video guy, who only 12 people are ever going to see it, and I got 300 or 3,000 people in the room, and the video guy's trying to tell me how to change the lights. It drove me nuts. But the nice thing is with digital cameras today, we can get a lot more nuance in the camera or in the lighting, and we can also be dimmer if we need to, or we can have contrast, which is kind of cool. We don't typically light for video like that. We don't typically light for video like for the way that some people do for podcasts or video, YouTube videos, that kind of thing. That's not really how we do things, partly because it's not the setting that we're in, but it's also most of our clients aren't in that kind of setting. Most of our clients don't have big TV lights on stage in their church or in their theater. So we tend to talk about what happens when you're using theatrical lighting like this and you're taking video from that. I think that it's really interesting when you start to look at this. Like, it's important to be able to set lighting with your camera on. If you come in here and you look at this and how really this purple light that's on here is really not that deep at all. This isn't a deep color of purple, but it looks significantly different on the camera than it does in real life. It's super, super important to be able to test these things and get a handle on what you're doing. We've talked about lighting lots of times before for Resource Stage. Front lighting, top lighting, some level of lighting in the back to create some depth, all super important things. I specifically bring this up because we've had clients who have called us up and they've said, we want to be able to stream. We've said, what is the lighting in your room? And they're like, I got money for streaming. I don't have lighting or I don't have money for lighting. We say, well, you need both. And they say, well, I got money for streaming. So they go ahead and they do that. And then sometimes it works okay, and sometimes they're really not happy with the results. Excuse me. So I would, I think we would always recommend that you consider what that lighting is going to look like. If you need to borrow a camera and do some tests, then contact us. If you need to use it for a while and do some different tests, you can rent it from us, and we'll help you try to figure that out. Okay, moving right along. Video switching for streaming and recording. There's lots of different video switchers out there. We've got Roland video switchers that have two HDMI inputs. We've got switchers that have 4 inputs, mixtures of SDI and HDMI, HDMI and SDI, SDI and HDMI, depending on what's going on. Does everybody understand the difference between SDI and HDMI? All right, let's talk about that for a sec. So HDMI is the protocol that we all know and maybe kind of sort of love because that's the one that was designed to come from our DVD player to go into our television. And this was going to be awesome because this was going to give us a way to get digital video into our television. It was going to be awesome, right? Remembering that it was originally designed to go that distance. That's it. It was never designed to be used the way that we in our industry want to be able to use it. We want to go 200 feet to go to a video projector or to TVs in different classrooms. Excuse me. We want to be able to do all kinds of things. We want to be able to split it infinite amounts of times. We want to be able to do all kinds of weird things, but it's not designed to do that. SDI, on the other hand, is a protocol, excuse me, is a protocol that was designed for sending video for cameras over coax. In 3G SDI, which is a standard that we use for a lot of things today, you're able to send 1080p video over one coax cable with full audio. Okay? So we typically will use SDI for some things and HDMI for other things. And then we take HDMI and then we kind of manipulate that a little bit, and we use a protocol called HD-Base-T, which is taking HDMI and converting it to a digital protocol that we can send over Cat6 over a distance and then convert it back to HDMI. Okay? Without confusing that, let's not talk about HD-Base-T tonight, but with HDMI, it's typically in video streaming and recording, it's typically the local stuff. It's the stuff that is at the desk. It's coming from a computer into the switcher. It's coming out of the switcher into a monitor for a preview like this. It's coming out of the switcher going into a recorder often. SDI is typically used for going from cameras into the switching devices. Some people will take SDI out of a switcher and go to projectors or go to other displays around a space. We typically avoid that. There's a whole bunch of different discussion about that, and we can talk about that. That's not why we're here tonight. We are going to touch on it just a little bit more in one of the other slides, but for now, typically SDI is coming from cameras and devices like that, and typically HDMI is coming from a computer or another source, like a consumer source. Okay? So, you need to know your inputs and outputs. These are SDI inputs, BNC connectors. Okay? These HDMI inputs, and this one, this is actually the switcher that we're using at the back there tonight. This switcher has 2 scaled inputs that are HDMI. We also have the ability to take a VGA or a component video in. I don't know that we ever have, but you can. And then in this switcher, we have the ability to come out in both SDI and HDMI. In this switcher, the outputs are ganged. So output 1 in SDI and HDMI are together. Output 2, SDI and HDMI are together. And then we have the multi-view, which is what you're seeing over here. Okay? It's a good idea to know kind of how all these things are coming in as you're planning out your system. So, for instance, tonight we have a camera coming in on SDI number 1. That's this guy right over here, right? But as I said earlier on, we have input number 6 is an HDMI input. So that's right here. So that's that other camera. It's coming in on HDMI. My computer is coming in on input 5, right here. But the keying, the downstream keying is input number 3 on SDI. That's right here. So we're taking the HDMI output out of that computer and converting it to SDI with a little box, and then we're going into there. Okay? Without getting into why or how we're doing that, that's kind of the gist of it. You need to be able to think it through. You need to figure, okay, I've got these many inputs, these many outputs. How am I going to put this thing together? And we can help you do that. We can kind of help you walk through that. In this case, we also have balanced outputs for audio, which is great, because then we can go directly into our mixer. We can come into the mixer with, we can come in from the mixer, from the audio mixer, with balanced inputs as well. Okay? Oh, I should say that one of the advantages to that is that I can take an audio feed, because this mixer has multiple inputs. I can take an audio feed that is the general mix for the event, for the service, for the whatever, but I can also take a split of my important microphone. So I can have a split from, say, the pastor, teacher's mic, go directly into one of these inputs, and then I've got separate control of that input for the stream, separate from everything else that's happening in the room. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. All right, moving along. This is another little switcher. This one's SDI with a couple of HDMIs. One of the things to watch here is that this HDMI is not scaled, but this one is. One of the big limitations of this little switcher is that, one, it's pretty inexpensive. I think you can buy this switcher for $1,200, something like that. The limitation is that before you turn this switcher on, you need to decide, I mean, not once forever, like you can turn it off and change it again, but you need to decide, am I running in 720p, 1080i, or 1080p? You need to decide that when you're using the mixer, or the switcher, because these 3 inputs have no scaling on them. The 4th one does have scaling, but the other 3 do not. So that means that because it doesn't have scaling, if I switch this into, say, 1080p, then that means these inputs have to be 1080p. If they're not, it doesn't know what to do with it. Does that make sense? You save some money, but you have some limitation, okay? It's a cool little switcher, and we've got a few people using these, and they're great. We've got one in rentals, and it's definitely done resource stage before, and a lot of people wouldn't recognize the difference of whether or not we're using that one or that one. It's how you use it. Okay. All right. Recording video, not like the good old days. Back in the day, you could just go and take the audio or take the video output out of your switcher with composite video, stick it into your VCR. It was awesome, and you could just start recording. And that seemed to work out pretty well. It's not like that anymore. There's all kinds of other pieces that kind of go along with this. Today, we are often recording to software. Sometimes we're going to hardware. And often now, when we're streaming, we're able to record to the cloud. There's different reasons why you might want to do one or the other. Tonight, as Don mentioned, we are recording to software, so the computer that we have sitting at the back that we use for streaming, that we've been using for streaming for a number of years, we are recording directly to that. You can go to hardware. What I mean by hardware as opposed to software, because obviously software is going to be on some sort of computer. Hardware would be a box that's dedicated just to recording. We've got a couple of different options that we like to use for that. Some of the streaming devices that we use have that functionality within them, and we're going to talk about that tonight. But there are hardware devices that we really kind of like. There's one at the back there. It's from Data Video, and Data Video has a neat box that you can plug in a USB or a USB hard drive directly into the front of it, and then you can record straight to that, and it works really, really nicely. You can, with a monitor plugged in, it's kind of like navigating, I wouldn't say Windows, it's almost kind of like navigating a DVD recorder if you've ever used something like that. So you can press record, you go into it, and you can see all of your recordings, delete ones that you need to, that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. And then in the cloud, there's different schools of thought on this. Sometimes people record to the cloud and they're just using it as a raw backup. Other people are saying, well, whatever goes to the cloud, that's what we're going to offer up to people later on. And if you want to come back and re-watch the stream, then that's what you get. Well, it depends. If you need to be able to edit something, add in something, take out something, whatever, then that might not be the way you want to do it. It's up to you. Okay? All right. Check your settings. This is one of the big things. When you're recording, know what your settings are set at, because you could end up blowing through a USB stick you thought was really big and it's not so much, because you're recording at a really high bit rate. If you're recording, it can be a bit of an issue. Often, same sort of thing, cloud space, hard drive space. We've done events at different times where it goes on for 3 days, literally, and we need to be careful because we're actually having to move stuff off the hard drive just to make sure that we've got enough space onto a second hard drive, that kind of thing, just to make sure that we've got enough space to keep going. Okay? All right. Video systems. So, again, this is the video switcher that we have at the back, and this is a very typical setup if all you want to do is be able to take a couple of cameras and a couple of computers into it. So in this case, you'd be taking a couple of SDI cameras and a couple of HDMI computers, and then you could go to a recording device. The monitor that we're showing here would be showing this display over here. But then this nasty thing called HDCP comes along. And those of you who've been to Resource Stage before, when we're talking about video, maybe know what I'm talking about. But HDCP is the high bandwidth digital content protection. The purpose of HDCP is to protect digital copyrighted content as it travels from the device to your TV, generally through HDMI or DVI connections, and that's what Netflix says. But you'll notice that they say from a device to your TV. They say that because this was originally designed to protect people when they were going from their their DVD player into their television, going this distance, to make sure that you weren't using a DVD recorder to record that DVD and make an exact copy. Because in the digital world, when you make an exact copy, when you copy those ones and zeros, you've got the exact copy. So HDCP was created to stop that from happening. So what typically happens is if you take an HDMI cable, you come out of a device that supports HDCP, like a DVD player, Blu-ray player, many computers, you come out of that and you plug that into a recording device, then this handshake starts as soon as you turn on the devices. And the one says, hey, I'm about to produce some video for you. Are you HDCP compliant? And this device has to come back and say yes or no. It has to. If it has an HDMI connector on it, it has to say yes or no. It's encoded into it. If it comes back and says, yes, I'm HDCP compliant, I'm not going to rip you off, I'm not going to rip off Sony or anybody else, then they say, or Disney, and then they say, okay, great, here's the content. There you go. So in a situation like what we're doing tonight, I come out of the HDMI out of my laptop, go into a splitter there, and as soon as I plug that in, my laptop sends a signal out to this television and out to the video switcher through the splitter, and it says, hey guys, you guys HDCP compliant? The TV says, yeah, I'm a TV. I'm not a recording device. We're all good. The switcher says, yeah, I'm HDCP compliant. There we go. I am compliant. We're all good to go. No problem. So then everything's fine. Okay? So we can get the signal. Now, here's a problem though. If I put in a Blu-ray player, or if I start producing something on my laptop that's copyright, like Netflix, if I start streaming from Amazon Prime Video, something like that, then this automatically says, whoa, hold on, double check everything. Make sure that this is a display and this isn't a recording device. Well, if I put in my Blu-ray player here and I have a recording device here, then all of a sudden that stops working. The input will just stop. The switcher, depending on the switcher will often continue to take the inputs from the other three. It'll continue to output the preview, but it'll just stop this. Some switchers just say, forget it, we're done. Shuts down all the output right here. It depends on what the device is. And then we get a phone call. I think my cable's bad. I don't think it's your cable. If you're trying to do this, it becomes a problem. Okay? It stops that recording. So if you go back and you've got a computer in there and the computer is not doing anything that it's not supposed to, it's producing just content that I created in my office and everything's great, like tonight, then it's fine. It'll go through and record. Because it's saying, well, this isn't copyright material. Okay? Now, one of the things to note is there are some computers out there, specifically some Mac computers and some other PC computers, but a lot less PC computers, where it automatically says, I don't care, it's HDMI, it doesn't matter what I'm actually outputting, we're just going to put copyright protection on everything. So if you're going through a switcher, you're done. It's just going to shut it off. And we've had clients call us up and they've said, I'm not producing anything bad. It's not like I'm showing a Disney film. All I'm doing is showing my PowerPoint. And we say, what kind of computer is it? And they tell us. We say, well, try moving your PowerPoint to a different computer. They do, and it works fine. So you do have to be careful about that. But anytime that you're going to put copyright material and it's going to go through the recording device, it's going to be a problem. So another way of running this, PTZ camera. We plug in the controller into the PTZ camera. We now have two different control devices that we're using. Coming in, everything's cool. Switched out with another PTZ camera, no problem. Everything's basically the same. And this is pretty much what we're doing tonight. Going out to an HDMI splitter. We can go to a projection system and we can go to a streaming device. We can also split that another time and we can go to an encoding device to go to streaming. Okay? I can tell you that sometimes what we'll do in a church situation is we will put a splitter right here. So let's say this is my PowerPoint presentation computer or my computer that I'm using for ProPresenter, Easy Worship, Media Shout, what have you. Split that signal before it gets to my streaming and have that go off to any video switching device that I've got for going to my projectors. Does that make sense? Then that way I can still send things like sermon notes, words for songs, that kind of thing. That's a sticky subject. And that's not something we're going to tell you should do. But anything that you would typically put on the projectors in your auditorium, in your sanctuary, then you can have that go out. Does that make sense? All right. So, have I lost anybody yet, or are we okay so far? All right. So, how streaming online works, the short and sweet version. This is very glossed over, and we're going really quick. Local content comes in first. Again, that could be one computer, that could be that could be one camera, that could be multiple cameras and computers coming into a switcher. Could be one camera, one computer. Could be lots of different things. But whatever that is, that's that local content, audio and video typically. Then we're going to an encoding piece of hardware, something that is going to take that signal and it's going to make it into something that we can set up to the intraweb. Then we have a streaming service. Okay? Then from that streaming service, then that's going to the people. Okay? So let's break this down a little bit. How are you going to get into the encoder? How does the encoder know where to send the video? Okay? And then how will you present your viewers with the video? How are you going to get that video so that people can see it? Those are probably the three most important questions as you're kind of putting this whole thing together, because there's lots of different ways we can do this. So, first of all, let's talk about capture devices. We are, tonight, we are coming out of our video switcher, and we are coming out HDMI out of that into our streaming computer that we've built. That streaming computer has a card in the computer, and that is our capture device. There are video switchers, like these two guys. They both have USB 3 right on the back of them. So you can come straight out of either one of those video switchers and go directly into a computer. Okay? This box right here, we have one of those around here somewhere. That is HDMI input and USB 3 out of it. Any of these three devices, when you come out of that, that's going to go into the computer, into USB or into a capture card, and then from there, then you're going to use software to stream out. Whether that is software that's a specific encoding software, or whether that is something like YouTube or Facebook's encoding platform, whatever it is, when it comes into the computer with any of these three, it's coming in as a generic video input. And these are just three examples, of course. There's lots of different options out there. It's going to come in as a generic video input into your computer. Windows is just automatically going to say, oh yeah, I know what that is. It looks like a really high definition webcam. It's good. We can deal with that. And then from there, then you can stream out. Okay? Same thing works with a Mac. You plug those into a Mac and it'll, for the most part, know exactly what to do with it. So that's capture devices. We use capture devices for some projects. Absolutely. If a client says, I want to stream with software like OBS, or if they want to stream directly to YouTube or to Facebook, that can work. We are tending to like encoding devices better. There's a reason for this. These devices are designed to do this. This is it. These devices are not designed to do lots of other computing things and then putting software on them that does all kinds of interesting things. These devices are made to do this and this alone. So this box from Videon, VersaStream 4K. There's also a couple other VersaStream versions. This box, we can go SDI or HDMI into it. Then we come out Ethernet, out of this Ethernet port here, and we can take that into our network switch and plug that into our building network, into however we're getting to the internet, and we can stream directly from this. Okay? You can see here in their little diagram that you can take a camera right in. You can take whatever your switching is because it's essentially whatever's HDMI, as long as it's not HDCP copyright material. And then we can send that out, and they give you a couple of examples as to where you can go. What's really kind of neat about this box is you can send it to 3 different streaming places at the same time. Excuse me. You could go to YouTube and Facebook and then whatever other systems all at the same time.
But would you need a lot more bandwidth to do that then?
So that's an interesting point. What do you think?
I would think yes.
Uh-huh.
3 different places, so they all want the same bandwidth. So you take 3 times the bandwidth.
When you're using a hardware system like this that is doing the 3 different transmissions, right, for lack of a better term, okay, broadcast, then yes, you need to be able to have the bandwidth to be able to support that, okay? You can also, with this box, and I'm not done with that answer, so I'm going to come back to it in a couple minutes, okay? You can also send directly from this box to other positions, and you can have transmit and receive sorts of things happening, okay? So this is one box. It's a neat little box. Works pretty well. This one from Data Video, very, very similar. What I like about this one is that I have big buttons that I can push. And for volunteers, we talked about earlier on, it was already mentioned tonight, how do we make this simple? Well, if you press the stream button, it's going to stream. As long as our settings are right, if you hit that stream button, it's going to stream. It's going to start sending to where it's supposed to go. And we're going to come to where it's supposed to go in a minute, okay? You can also, with this device, record directly to an SD card on the front of it. And one of the things that's cool about this, because we get fanatical about this stuff, is we can rack mount it if we need to. Okay? All right. This one you can't rack mount as easily. This is a company out of Montreal, actually, Matrox. Matrox built a few different boxes. They actually have a really interesting new box that I don't have a picture of here tonight. This is SDI input, SDI output if you're needing to go to another device. And it's got HDMI input as well, so you get to choose. It can record to SD card or USB at the same time. And you can stream to 2 different channels. So the video on box was 3. This one you can stream to 2. So that one's kind of neat.
Cost of that?
Donald,
$2,700.
it was almost like he sold one this morning, almost like that. Webcaster 2. So this is a company called Epifen. If you go to Epifen's website, they tell you that they're located in California. Truth is, that's their sales office. They're actually a Canadian company, but it's better for some reason to say you're an American company. You sell more things. These guys build a whole bunch of neat stuff. This is like one of their smallest products. And this is so dumb simple, it's ridiculous. What's neat about this guy is that it's specifically made to stream to social media networks. And there's good and bad about, well, there's good and bad about social media networks. There's good and bad about streaming to social media networks. We'll leave it at that for tonight. But what's neat about this is that I can go in and I can decide which one I'm going to stream to by clicking on just one button. And then it's going to come up with a little display there, and it's going to tell me the information that I need to be able to punch that into my Facebook or my YouTube account and stream that out. It's a pretty cool little box. I can actually use this. I think I show this in the next picture. So it's got HDMI in. It's got a LAN port out. But because you see this nice antenna on it, I can take that box and let's say I'm doing something on location somewhere. I can use the hotspot from my phone, and I can use a battery to go to the DC input on this. And I can actually, just have it hanging there off the side of my tripod, and I can stream wirelessly from this box to Facebook or YouTube. It's a pretty cool little box. And the fact that I can use this, well, yeah, you got to be careful about your data plan. But one of the things that's really neat about this is that because it's got HDMI in it, I can go directly from that camera that it's hanging off the tripod, or I can come out of a video switcher and do other things with it. Okay. Oh, hold on a second. That is not true. Sorry. This is an HDMI out of there. There's another port on it. Okay. So this is OBS. And I'm not going to talk a lot about OBS tonight. I'll just touch on a little bit. This is the number one piece of software that people want to talk about when it comes to streaming. Everybody wants to talk about, well, how do I use OBS? Why don't I just use OBS? It's free. Why can't I just do this? Why can't I just do this? It's great. I believe we're streaming with OBS tonight, aren't we? Yeah. It's great. It's really neat. You can do all kinds of cool things with it. You can have multiple devices coming in. So remember we talked a few slides ago, we were talking about capture devices. I can have multiple capture devices coming into my computer, and I can switch with this. So I can skip needing a switcher if I have OBS. I can do all kinds of interesting things within OBS. I can do things like titling and that kind of stuff within the software. I can also have multiple audio inputs coming in with OBS. This is great if the people who are using it understand how it works. But, like a lot of free systems out there, it's designed by people who are a little bit more tech savvy, and this gets used for all kinds of things, from broadcast for independent television stations through to people who are streaming on Twitch for video games and that kind of stuff. It's all kinds of different applications. It's free? Absolutely. Is it the right solution for a lot of clients when they're trying to make something really simple for their people? We get more phone calls from people saying, I can't figure out how to make this work. It's like, you know what? It might be time for you to skip OBS and go to a piece of hardware.
I got a question. See, OBS is free.
Yeah.
How expensive a computer do you need to run it with multiple inputs if you start using it for switch and then scaling? And
You know what? It's actually not that bad. It really isn't. But again, it depends on what it is that you're trying to do. Now, I don't think that we have ever implemented it for a client. We've got clients who've implemented it themselves where they've got multiple inputs coming in. But typically, if we're involved with this, it's somebody's taking one HDMI input, they're just making it full screen for their streaming, and then going out from there. Maybe doing some titling with it, but that's it. Okay. Yeah, it's cool. It's got some interesting things that you can do with it, but more of a learning curve, more things you can mess up, more things that can become a problem if what you're trying to do is get everything to be simple. Okay? All right, so we come back to here. So how are we getting into the encoder? Well, we've talked about that. There's a couple of different ways we can do that. We can come into the encoder with, from our camera directly. We can come into that if it's hardware or software. You can use any of those different things. Often it's HDMI, sometimes it's SDI. Okay? That encoder could be that encoder box that's going directly to the web, or it could be that device that's then going to the encoder software like OBS. Okay? Have I lost anybody yet? We understand what those differences are? All right. How does the encoder know where to send the video? So you've plugged it into your internet. Now, how does it know where to go? RTMP info from the streaming service tells the encoder where to stream to. Real-time messaging protocol developed by Macromedia for streaming audio, video, and data over the internet. This has been for a long time. This is still the standard for getting, for protocol for encoding to go to the internet. It is the language of streaming online. So, any of these services have an RTMP ability, so they will take that in, and there will be somewhere that you put that information into the site. So let's jump to here for a second. Let's take a look at the streaming service that we use for Resource Stage. I am going to that one. So if I bounce to here, this is our real-time messaging protocol developed
right
by
there.
Macro
That's
Media
what's
for
actually
streaming
up on the
audio,
screen right
video,
now,
and
so you
data
can see
over
we're
the
actually
internet.
a little bit
This
delayed.
is still. This is. I'm going to go to our dashboard, and there are. Let's see if we go to today. There are 19 views and 12 unique viewers watching right now. Okay, if we go to live streams, and I'm not going to go and monkey with the stream that is that's running right now. That's a terrible pun, isn't it? I'm going to go to details and take a look at this. So this is showing me right here. That's the RTMP that I need to put into OBS or into any of those encoder platforms to be able to tell it that that's where it's going to stream to. So it's going to stream to StreamMonkey's services. Okay, if I was streaming to YouTube, same sort of thing. I can get that RTMP from them. If I want to stream from Facebook, then I can do that. Now, understanding that both of those platforms have some ability to make things a little bit slicker and a little bit cleaner with they use keys and that kind of thing. But essentially, that's what you're doing is you're giving it that information. With this, we can then take that and dump that into the box, and then that will stream directly from the box directly to the internet. Does that make sense so far? So we're now closing that between, okay, we've come into the encoder box. Now we're going to send it up. Where are we sending it to? That's where we're sending it to. That's the address we're going to. So you need to connect to the box. Well, if you're using OBS, then you would put it into the software. If you are putting it into the box, those boxes all have a browser-based page. So you go in through a browser with the IP address, okay, and you find that box, and you put in the information into there.
Is this something you'd have to do every stream, or once you get the information, you can just push your one button and it'll automatically start?
So this is an interesting question. So let's go back to here for a second. And if we look at our live streams, just going to click on this again for a second, you'll see this is my RS test stream. This is the one I set up for tonight just to kind of fool around with. And then we've got our resource stage stream. One of the things that you'll find about our resource stage stream is that it never changes. We have decided that our stream is never going to change. It is always going to go to the same stream. Now, if we take our system, and we've done this multiple times, where we're doing an event for somebody, and we want to take the system and we're going to use our StreamMonkey account to stream for the client, then we create a whole new stream. Well, that creates a new address, and so then we need to point that somewhere else. But for resource stage, we've decided that we are always going to use the same stream, which means that we don't need to go into the box or into the software and change that each time. So, if you kind of start to follow this along, that means that when I press stream on the front of that box, I'm specifically thinking of that data video box, but the Matrox box is similar. I press the stream button on the front. It's going to start streaming to there every single time to the same stream connection. That's great for volunteers. It's great so that you don't have to monkey with this every time. You can get the settings all right for what size. If we go into options and edit, right? Things like, what's my pre-roll video? What's my video going to be beforehand? Am I going to have a progress bar? Am I going to just start it? All of these sorts of things. How is that going to look? I can tweak all of those things. If I go back, if I go to details, I can make sure that all of these things are set the way that they're supposed to be set. I can set my bit rate, all of that stuff. I can set it once, and I don't need to worry about volunteers getting in there and fooling around with something, right? Because it's done and it's ready to go. And I know that the quality is going to be this, in theory, every time that I'm streaming. Does that make sense? However, if that's the case, what happens if I want to have streams that are one after another for different times or different days or different services or different whatever? Well, that's a different animal. Okay, so we'll come to that in a couple minutes. From here, I can click on embed, and you see this code here. One of the things that's one of my favorite things about StreamMonkey is that I can just click on this right here. It automatically copies it to the clipboard. I can go to this page, right click, click on here, and this is going to, we can't do that one. There's nothing there. We're not streaming to that one, Carl. Let's go back to here. Let's go live stream. Just thinking, go to resource stage, click on this, right click here, paste, go, whatever. Well, that's a different animal. Okay, so we'll come to that in a couple minutes.
That's silly sometimes.
From here,
but there you go.
I can click
We've
on
got
embed.
that.
We've got the
this
ability
code here.
to
One of the things that's
see that. Oh,
one of my
see,
favorite things about
StreamMonkey
slowing
is
down,
that
or
I
is
can
that-
just
no,
click
it's not
on
actually
this right
buffering,
here.
that's just
It
me.
automatically copies
right.
it to the clipboard.
So-
I can go. What you saw me do there was grab the direct player link or the website embed code. So this is the piece that, with a company like StreamMonkey, I can take that code and then dump it into my website. Whether you are making a custom website and you're sitting at home programming all the HTML for your website, or whether you're using something like Squarespace or Wix or something like that to build your website, you pretty much always have the ability to dump in some iframe code. You can see that this is iframe code right here, and you can take that and you can put that into your website. And if you're a little bit savvy, you can probably look at this and say, oh, width 100%, height 100%. Well, I don't need that to be that full big thing. I'm going to make it like this. And you can take that information and you can put that where it needs to go. And you can embed that directly into your website. Again, what's happening is we're coming into our encoding device. The encoding device says, well, here's the address that I'm supposed to be streaming to. It streams it to the internet, okay, through StreamMonkey services, and then StreamMonkey saying, perfect, we're going to change that for you, and we're going to send that to your website. And now people are not using your internet service provider web plan for your website. They're now doing that through the service that you're paying for from StreamMonkey, or not paying from for YouTube or something of that sort. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. Yeah, well, in the case of something like this, like if you look at the way that we've got it on the resource stage site, you actually go to the resource stage site, you never leave the resource stage site. This code is part of the site. So it's streaming within the Horizon site. Okay? What's cool about that is that I never have to worry about what sort of other ads are down the side. I don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff because I know that this is just the video that's being served up on my website. Okay? All right. Let's go back to here. All right. Does that help? Does that help to make things a little bit clearer? All right. So we're back to this thing again. How will you present your video present your viewers with the video? That's exactly it. Are you going to send people to YouTube or Facebook or something of that sort, or are you going to have it embedded into your website? And there's ways to do it with YouTube where you're streaming to YouTube, but you're embedding it into your site. There's definitely ways of doing that. It's up to you how you want to play with that. Okay? And then of course it's going to viewers. This is just a quick page showing again how an encoder would work. And this is, I think we've already kind of covered this, but this is a breakdown of how we will often set up something of this sort. It's not super complicated. We've got a couple of cameras. They're getting their power and their control through a PoE network switch, which is also connected to the camera controller, which in this case is also PoE, which is kind of nice, cut down on well warts. We've got SDI. We're showing it as both SDIs coming out of the cameras, going into the video switcher. We are going from our computer, PowerPoint or otherwise, into the video switcher. We've got a preview monitor, which for what we're doing is always a must. Then we're coming HDMI out, going into, we're showing it as a Videon streaming switcher here. This is, there's a network line going from the computer to here in case we need to set things up, make any changes on a Sunday morning. Again, if you've got it down to the point where everything's good to go all the time, then it's great. And then we're connected to the internet. It's not super complicated. Again, sometimes what we'll do is this line that's going your computer PowerPoint going to the video switcher, we'll cut that and we'll put in a splitter there so we can split the HDMI going to our projectors and other things in the sanctuary or to other places in the building. Okay? All right. Few more things to consider. One of the big questions that comes up regularly, how fast does my internet speed need to be? This is actually something that I found on the Epiphan website. They're the guys who make that Webcaster X2, and they make the AVIO. That was that little blue box that has HDMI in and USB 3 out. And their question, what they've done is they actually, I think, got most of this information from Netflix. But this is what they're using as a guideline. They're saying if you want to be able to have a standard definition solid video, again, 480i-ish, then you need to have about a 3 megabit per second upload speed. And most of us have that. Most of us have that at home these days, right? Not everybody. Yeah, maybe not at Crossroads. But that's kind of where you need to be. I mean, my phone can do faster than that, that's for sure, okay? Then, if you want to go to high definition, about 5. If you want to go to 4K, then you're jumping up to 25. That's the difference when somebody says, well, why don't we stream at 4K? Well, it's 5 times the amount of bandwidth. We're pretty fortunate around here. When we moved from 3/4 of a block away to here, we got here and found we had no internet. It was a disaster. It was terrible. It was 2 megabits download speed. It was a little nasty. Did I also mention that we had just purchased a new IP phone system? It was a really bad couple of days. So we were very, very fortunate, and this is a shameless plug. We were very, very fortunate to work with the folks at start.ca here in London, and they were awesome. They told us, best case scenario, we'll have fiber into your building by Christmas, and they had it done in about a week and a half. They're amazing. They ran fiber from down the street, down the sidewalk, underneath our driveway, across the office, and we're getting a ridiculous download and upload speed. It's awesome. So we do have fast enough internet here to actually be setting up 4K if we wanted to. We don't really see the need to right now, but we could definitely do that. So then the question becomes, well, how much room do I need for buffer? Because I'm in a church and I got other people in the church who know the Wi-Fi password, who are children's ministries running something else. What about if they do this? What about if they do that? That kind of thing. What do I need to do? Well, the rule of thumb appears to be 1.5 times. So if you said, I want to broadcast at HD, instead of making sure that you've got 5 meg, make sure that you're somewhere in that 7 to 8 sort of a range for your upload speed, not your download speed, okay? Because this is that's the second number and usually the smaller number that is quoted when you're checking into your speed. If you have never checked your speed in your church or your school or wherever, there's a couple of different ways to do that. You can go to speedtest.net, I believe it is, or you can just Google, I think it's fast.net, and both of those are pretty good. You will definitely get different numbers from those two companies, which is weird because they're supposed to be giving you the same information. It's strange. But that will give you an idea as to what it is that's actually happening. And what they're doing is they're actually setting it up so that you are downloading packets from the internet and then you are uploading packets to the internet. And then it gives you a realistic idea as to what your speed will be. Okay? Does that help? A little bit of an idea? All right. Digital video recording, so DVR. There are some streaming services that will allow you to do this. If you are using something like Facebook, it just automatically happens. In YouTube, I believe you have an option to do this, and you can decide whether or not the recording that you just did is going to automatically be there, and it's going to be recorded in there. Somebody like StreamMonkey, and I talk about them a lot because we're big fans of how they work, and we've been partnering with them for a long time. But when you're doing that, then you have this ability to not only record there, but you have the ability to pause, rewind, fast forward, that kind of stuff, because it's recording it. You know, when I watch the Blue Jays lose on MLB TV, then I can pause the game when you know I get up or come back, and I can press pause again, or press play and it goes. Same sort of thing. You can do exactly the same thing for your services. Okay. Next one, recording online for on-demand viewing. Again, YouTube, Facebook, that kind of thing. They often have this sort of thing built right in. Other streaming services, it depends. Depends on what you're paying for, and this comes back to that idea of how are we dealing with things in the future. So on a Sunday morning, I press stream. It's streaming exactly to the same place every time. It's showing up on my website in the same place every time. Okay, what is going to happen with that later on? And that's a discussion that you need to have as you're trying to put this together, because if it's just going to go ahead and record it there, and then you're going to end up with a playback playlist that you can go back to, that's great. That can work out really well. But how are you going to get to that playlist? So that the ability to get to that playlist is another embed code, okay? Or, again, lots of churches, they just put it on Facebook, and then people can just scroll back to last week, 2 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, what have you, and they can refine that, okay?
Would that be something you'd do like a title page, that's something you'd have to enter every time, or could you program to automatically just program a date as your title to keep it separated?
Yeah, so that kind of depends. It depends on the service. Different services have different ways of doing that. You can go back in and you can put in a title depending on, again, that service. Sometimes it just takes the first couple of frames like it would with if you upload a YouTube video, that sort of thing. It depends on the service. If we've talked for years about whether or not we want to put Resource Stage online in an on-demand format, one of the things that's held us back is whether or not we want to edit things, because the guy who talks sometimes says dumb things, and whether or not we should take those things out. But there's different ways you can do that. We have done some stuff for clients in the past, especially with conferences, where we have recorded everything, then we've uploaded it, and then that way we can cut the front and the back. Because like for tonight, we started streaming 5 minutes early. Well, if you're going to stream 5 minutes early, then that's 5 minutes of dead space at the beginning. And usually we don't have the ability to do a whole lot of editing online for that. Okay? Oh, sorry, geo-blocking is an interesting thing. Let's just go back there for a second. This sounds like you're being mean and you're not letting people watch your stream, but if you think about the fact that somebody like StreamMonkey charges you by the bandwidth, then if your focus for your stream is streaming to the people in London, in Sarnia, in wherever, then you may not want somebody from Zimbabwe being able to watch your stream. Not that you don't want them to watch it, they probably get something out of it, but if you're finding that there's a whole bunch of people who are spamming your site and they're just killing your, costing you a fortune because of that much being downloaded, then you can actually be controlling as to who's able to watch it. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm just saying it's a feature. Password protection, again, we do conferences sometimes where people want to be able to control who can watch it. That makes total sense to me. Corporate events, that kind of thing. That way you can pass out passwords to people and they can go in and they can only watch the stream that way. Online chat is something that we've been doing and playing with Resource Stage for a while now. And it gives you the ability for people to be able to log in and they can chat. That, of course, can be... it is a feature of something like YouTube or Facebook because that's often in there. However, it will often require people to have an account, or sometimes you have very little way of controlling what people say. Here's the thing. If you want open to anybody and everything, then free stuff is great. If you want to be able to control what's happening, you want to be able to monitor or moderate what's happening, be able to say, you know what this person is saying is not really helpful for the rest of what's going on here, then you may want to look at some other options. The one that we use right now is called Chat Roll, and it's a pretty good service because we can control what's going on, and we can also have a every stream has its own chat roll history, so then we could actually include that with an on-demand replaying of that video. So if somebody was to go back and watch the stream from February, then they could actually see the chat that went along with that if we chose to do it that way. Okay? It's, again, not always applicable for church, more applicable for corporate application, that kind of thing. Simulated live. So this is the kind of thing where sometimes people say, well, we're actually pre-recording something, but we're going to rebroadcast, right? Kind of like the 11 o'clock news being rebroadcast at 6 in the morning, that kind of thing. So it's going to start playing at a certain time. We say, oh yeah, we're doing resource stage that night, but we're only streaming it, and it turns out it's actually the stream that we recorded 2 years ago. That's that kind of thing. Okay? And I think that's it. I think that's all I've got for tonight. Have I answered questions or have I created more questions? Yes. Perfect.
Okay, I'm thinking like video on demand. Like you say, I want to get my service up on the website as quick as possible. I don't want to have to spend an hour editing it.
Yep.
How easy would it be to record it onto the computer and then upload it for video on demand as versus live streaming? Would it be much of a difference in cost on equipment or?
No, so you're asking, just so I understand. So what you're saying is that if I didn't want to stream live, but I wanted to edit and everything into a local recording and then go ahead and upload that so that it's there by Sunday afternoon or Monday morning or something of that sort, right? I think that if I were to do that and I was trying to do it the most efficient way, I would probably have almost all the same sort of equipment, because if I'm editing and switching cameras while it's happening, then I'm more likely to kind of get a reasonable switch out of that and a reasonable looking product. The advantage to that, of course, is that if I need to pause, some churches say, well, we're not going to stream anything that's offering. We're not going to stream anything with the kids at the front of the church. We're not going to stream any worship, right? And there's valid reasons for all of those. We're not going to stream... some people say they want to stream everything. Other people say we're not going to stream baptisms. We're not going to stream baby dedications, that kind of stuff. It's all good. You can edit all of those things kind of live, but if you just keep your stream running, then you may not. We've got some church clients who they just kind of pause and record, or, hit pause and record on the recording when that kind of stuff happens. But they continue to switch because what is going out to, that same signal is going out to the nursery or going out to the hallways and that kind of thing. It kind of depends. Is it going to be any faster? I don't know. It depends on how you're doing it. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Jim.
Question on the audio feed to it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talking about what's coming out of the main speakers. The worship team can be bouncing around 90 decibels, and yet the sermon would be 70 decibels.
Yeah.
How does that? I'm presuming you don't want that same differential going into the recording.
Yeah. So okay. So what you're asking is that if we've got worship team is really loud, they're playing for the room, but pastor minister is a different level. This is a good time when you want to start utilizing your digital console, because you can do some interesting things with that, right? So you could take, for instance, you could take an input into one channel, like the pastor's mic, and you could copy that same input into another channel that's going direct out or through an aux or through a matrix, not a matrix, usually an aux, right? And that would be going out, but you could have a compressor on that, or you could have it at a different volume or what have you that's going directly to the stream. You could also do the same thing. Remember I mentioned if you're going to do a video switcher like the one that we've got here, or one of the not the encoding ones, the capture sorts of streaming ones, then you've got audio inputs, so you could take that split for those important microphones. We have some clients who are doing full-on, completely separate mixes for recording and for streaming than what they're doing in the sanctuary. That's certainly a possibility. And certainly, again, with digital consoles, the ability to mix on an iPad is great. If you want to be able to do that, pair of headphones and you're mixing to that aux. There's a few different ways.
You would actually want to keep the sound level the same, whether it was like a worship team or the pastor or that broadcast?
I guess the question is this: if you were to turn on the television and you were to watch a service on TV, then usually the level of the person speaking and usually the level of the band is about the same level, right? I think that kind of answers the question. You're going to be shooting for that sort of a thing.
That's what, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then you can use the digital monitor different ways.
Yeah, for sure. You can use the console to your advantage. Just remember that there are some other pieces that you need to keep in there. Like, for instance, if you're in a church where you have no mics on, say, your drum kit, and you're expecting the drum kit to come through in your recording, it's probably not. No, it's probably not. It's probably not going to come in. So that's another story. But you do need to be able to take that into account.
Or an ambient mic.
Absolutely. An ambient mic can help a lot, and that's what some churches do, is they'll just take an ambient mic and just use that for recording, and then have some specific microphones that they're using for other things.
A bit of reverb in there too to help, because
Depending, yeah,
the live sound in the room, when you go to your pure sound
in the recording.
Facebook mix, everything's too squeaky clean.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in order to be able to capture what's happening for the entire, kind of capture that idea of the room and the idea of the service, then being able to use an ambient mic is a good way to go, for sure. Okay. The things that we talked about tonight, I know that, we talked earlier on that wanting to know how can we make things a little bit simpler. Some of those devices make things a lot simpler. But how you set that up has a big impact on that. So again, Facebook, YouTube, they've got some great things going on. There are some other things that I like the ability to be able to control that. Again, StreamMonkey's not the only option. There are other options out there. There are lots of streaming services that are made specifically for churches. There are streaming services that are made specifically for schools. So, a lot of them are using the same sort of back end, but they're tailoring what they're doing to those groups. And so there's there's kind of some neat things that they do specifically for those groups. Just one comment that I'll throw out there that really has nothing to do with us. It's really up to the individual church. You need to be careful about copyright. A lot of times we'll have somebody say to us, well, we pay for SOCAN or we pay for our CCLI. That doesn't cover you for streaming, right? CCLI is based on how many members are in your church or how many people are there on a regular Sunday, that kind of a thing. That does not cover you for streaming online. So, and if you don't agree with me and if you think that it does, well, that, look it up. That's totally fine. If you read it differently than we do, it doesn't matter to us because it's not up to, it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to come after us. But you might want to take a look into that and just confirm, because you are streaming a level of copyright material. So you need to be able to be careful about what you're doing about that. Okay?
Don't know if you'll know the answer to this. I understand lyrics. Yeah, you really need the right license to put the lyrics online.
Sure.
What if it's just a congregation singing those songs? Do you know if that's still copyright touching gray area?
I'm not sure whether or not just the lyric, like producing the lyrics and showing the lyrics versus people singing it together is a different thing. There's some gray area in there, and some people read it and say you absolutely can't do this, and other people read it and say sure you can. It's totally fine. It's not my expertise. The other thing to keep in mind, in this day and age, if you are going to be recording or streaming anything that has kids and certainly vulnerable groups, then you need to be able to post that somewhere to say that this is what we're doing. We have worked with some clients who have specific areas within their auditoriums or their sanctuaries or their churches that they say this area is designated that the camera will never land in this area. And so that's one way to deal with it. Okay? All right. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I hope that was helpful.